Hello, everyone, and welcome to the 16th ever Highlight Haven interview. My name is Matthew Heiserman, and today we are joined by a very special guest. He is a Denver Broncos reporter for Mile High Sports and the host of Locked On Broncos. Let me welcome Cody Roark to the show. It's great to have you on.
Thanks, Matthew. Appreciate you for having me on here. Looking forward to talking with you.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, let's get right into it. I just want to start by asking when you first decided that you wanted to work in the sports industry.
It's a great question. It goes back many years. I never thought. So if you would have asked me when I was 18, 19 years old if I'd ever be doing anything that I'm doing now, I would have said you're crazy. I didn't have any aspirations of it. I didn't have any plans to do that. I love sports, but I was playing football, and playing football was really my dream that I had. I wanted to find a way to keep doing it. Obviously, loved it in high school. Wanted to go play in college, suffered a really bad concussion my senior year, and that really impacted me from really being able to do and achieve a lot, some of the things that I wanted to. But then I found an opportunity with a team to go and play after high school and kept that going in a little bit of a developmental league, semi-pro as well, and just really kind of just, hey, I got to keep the love for football going. It wasn't until I would say my fifth season in the ADFL for a team called the Grand Junction Gladiators. I tore my ACL during the season. We were playing, a team we were playing Metro State in Denver, and I tore my ACL. And from that point forward, I knew, like, I'd never suffered a major injury like that before, but I just knew, like, hey, I'm not going to be able to come back and play at the same level that I was. And on top of that, it's for the love of the game. As much as I love the game, it's costly. Having surgery is very costly, especially with an ACL injury. So I said, but how do I still keep my love for football going? Now, at the time, I was coaching high school ball still. I was probably in my fourth year coaching high school football at that point. But for me, it's like, I love that, but that's only seasonal. And I said, how can I keep my love for the game going? And I decided to just do a podcast. Like, for the first time. It was called the Coach's Corner Podcast, and interviewed some names in the NFL world on there, and that really kind of jump started. Like, hey, I really enjoy this. I want to do this. And then from that point, it led to me getting an opportunity from David Locke. He's the radio voice, play-by-play of the Utah Jazz. He started up this podcast company a year prior called the Locked On Podcast Network. And he asked me if I'd be interested in doing, coverage on the Denver Broncos. I said, absolutely, would love to. And from that point forward, been able to build a name for myself a little bit. Luckily I had some good connections in the media world. Obviously I knew some players very well, and that certainly did help, because you get them on as guests. It kind of boosts people's ability to say, hey, like, okay, this person had somebody notable on there. Okay, let's pay attention to what they're saying. And that's kind of how it all got started. But it never really started at all with any ambition to want to do this, wanting to get into sports media. I consumed sports media. I watched it like nonstop. But that kind of road, like one career ending, led to the start of another career.
Yeah, now previously you worked as an on-air TV host and NFL analyst at Pro Football Network. Can you kind of just describe what that opportunity was like?
Yeah, I mean, it was a great opportunity. Probably an opportunity I wouldn't have gotten if it wasn't for David Locke and kind of building a name for myself in the Denver media market a little bit throughout the years prior. It was great. I got to host a daily show with Trey Wingo, who I don't know if you know him, but Trey Wingo was always someone I grew up watching on ESPN quite a bit. ESPN Radio, had a chance to do a show with him every day, and then we got to go to. It was when the Los Angeles Rams played the Cincinnati Bengals in the Super Bowl. We got to go down there for Radio Row. And it was my first real experience kind of hosting, in a sense, where it's live daily production, from 8:00 a.m. to 5:00 p.m., sometimes 5:30. I'm on camera from 8 to 5 with maybe a 5-minute break in between guests that are that are coming on air, and had a chance to, sit down and interview Chad Ochocinco, who I had crossed paths with earlier on, like when I was a sophomore in high school. Barry Sanders, Justin Herbert, Robert Woods. I mean, just the list goes on. And it was such a surreal moment for me to be able to experience that, because then I really started to get it in my head. I got maybe a little big headed in a sense, just because it's different when you get to interact with that and you're getting feedback from people like, wow, you make me feel really comfortable as an interviewer. Like, that right there was very big for me. And then I also had people saying like, hey, like, are you on any big network? And I was like, no, I just do this for Pro Football Network, which was a rising and up and coming company at the time. So it was a little bit of an ego boost, but at the same time, it requires a lot of work. And I think the number one lesson it taught me was you always have to brush up on who you're interviewing, what you're interviewing about. Before, I mean, going into it, I knew which guests I was getting throughout the week. A couple of big ones popped up. Didn't know was going to get Justin Herbert. Like that was one thing. Like Justin only went to a couple outlets, and one of them happened to be Pro Football Network. So, it was Justin representing on behalf of like the Pepsi Rookie of the Year, just kind of filling in there. And that was a huge moment for me, just being able to get praise and to have professional athletes say, hey, I really appreciate it. You asked me great questions. You made it comfortable. Like that to me was like the number one thing. I was like, hey, I want to do this a little bit more.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, of course, I do want to get into some Broncos talk as well. And of course, they just came off their 33-10 win against the New Orleans Saints on Thursday Night Football. What were your main takeaways following that matchup?
Yeah, I mean, Matthew, I think the challenge of Thursday night football is the short turnaround, right? You play a game on Sunday, and then you have to go and you have to try to get your body ready as quick as you can as an athlete for Thursday's game. And that was something I think talking to Broncos players on Tuesday when we had access to practice and our only open locker room, just talked to a few players and they said, yeah, we're just really trying to get our bodies right here. It's hard to go and do a full game plan install of a new opponent when you only have a few days to prepare. So the fact that they came out on the road and in an environment where there was so much going on, it was Sean Payton's return back to, a place where he helped build them back up into contenders on a night where Drew Brees is being honored at halftime. Like there was so much going on that could have served as a distraction for the team that week. And they just came out and they played with intensity, got the run game going, and they didn't allow those little things to distract them. And obviously, I think they took care of business. They beat a team that they should have beaten. I think one of the narratives we see in the NFL sometimes is, okay, hey, this team, the New Orleans Saints, they're so banged up on the offensive side of the ball. Well, if you struggle against them, then that's a bad sign about what type of team you are. Versus if you're a good team, you go out there and you beat a team the way that you should, okay, then it's a good sign that, hey, maybe this is a team that people need to pay attention to. I feel like that's the biggest takeaway we got from Denver. If their offense can start clicking, I think that they can be a team that causes problems for some people down the stretch.
Yeah, and then obviously the Broncos defense was nothing short of spectacular in that game. Despite the absence of superstar cornerback Pat Surtain, the defense accumulated a total of 6 sacks as well as 2 forced fumbles, one of which was returned for a touchdown by Cody Barton. Is this a defense that other teams should be afraid of?
I think so. I think it's a defense that when you look at it, if you look at the names of the players on the defense, as some people like in the national media, they'll look at, okay, well, I don't know who this guy's name is, so I'm probably not going to pay as much attention to it. Denver's got a lot of those guys. I mean, Patrick Surtain is the only first round pick that they have on that defensive side of the ball. Everyone else, you have different contributions. You got some second round guys, third round guys. You got some undrafted rookie free agents. And all of these guys are playing a pivotal role. I mean, you mentioned Pat. Obviously, it was bummer not to have him there. He should be good to go this week for the Carolina Panthers. Cody Barton stepping up, Riley Moss playing big, Brandon Jones, PJ Locke manning the back end of the safety position, veteran Levi Wallace stepping up. And then at linebacker, Cody Barton, look, he's a veteran guy, but he's, if you ask, I'd say most people are like, who's Cody Barton? He stepped up. Justin Sternad, obviously playing well. Defensive line-wise, you get Jordan Jackson, John Franklin Myers, you get Zach Allen, who's having a terrific year. And this is a defense that's creating pressure at a consistent rate for opposing quarterbacks. And when QBs don't have the time to stand back there in a clean pocket, they're forced to scramble. Well, Denver's scramble drill containment defensively has been pretty solid. And then you got guys who can play man-to-man coverage in the secondary. It makes it very hard. So I would say if it's a defense that definitely I think can hold their own. And if the offense finds a way to get going, I mean, Denver I think is a playoff contender if the offense can get going. The defense is good enough to get stops. And look, they're going to be tested here in the next couple of weeks. They got to take care of business against Carolina this weekend, but then they have a 2-game road stretch against Lamar Jackson, the Baltimore Ravens, and Derrick Henry, and then Patrick Mahomes and the Kansas City Chiefs. So we're going to learn a lot more about this team, I think, in the next 3 or 4 weeks. It'll help us get a little bit more of a clearer picture.
Yeah, now of course, that win bumps the Broncos record up to 4-3. How does that compare to your expectations prior to when the season started?
Yeah, I mean, I think if you find any episode I did of Lockdown Broncos before the season, like when win totals came out, the NFL schedule release came out, I mean, I was a little bit more, hey, I actually think Denver's going to be better than people think. That was my opinion. Obviously, a lot of the betting lines around the world had them at 5.5 wins, right? And right now they're at 4 wins, which means that they're 1 win away from meeting the expectations that most people had for them this season. But considering it's early on in the season and there are so many games, for Denver to potentially be at 5 wins right now, to me, seeing what we've seen from them defensively and even with some of the growth and the bright spots from Bo Nix offensively, I would say that they're exceeding expectations a little bit. And I always said the thing is, look, until somebody dethrones Kansas City in the AFC West, they're always going to be the team to beat. But if you're Denver and you can find a way to sneak into one of those wild card spots, that's all you need to do, I think, to change the narrative on how people are looking at them. Last year, Denver was 1-5. They went on a 5-game win streak, and all of a sudden, they were in the conversation. They were 1 game away from the AFC West lead at one point. Then they dropped a couple of games, late in the season, obviously to Detroit and to the Houston Texans. That made a big difference there. And then obviously they lost the last regular season game to the Raiders. But Denver clawed their way out of that hole. And now they're playing with a little bit of an advantage. Now the goal and the hope is that they don't get too full of themselves, at a 4-3 record. Like, hey, 4 wins is great, but that's not the goal. Their goal is to get more than they had last year. That was 8 wins. They're hoping to get 9 or 10 this year. But they want to end the season with a winning record and hopefully get to the playoffs.
Yeah, and I mean, of course, they want to get to the playoffs. And you said that they're, of course, probably not going to beat the Chiefs in the AFC West. The Chiefs 6-0 to start the year. Do you think there's a solid likelihood that they do end up making the playoffs?
I mean, as it stands today, they would be in. If the playoffs started today, they'd be the 7th seed. They'd be taking on the Houston Texans in the wild card round if that were the case. But I think so much of it is based on, okay, you got to take care of business in the conference record. Like you look at some of the remaining opponents that Denver has in the AFC. Well, obviously, you got a matchup against the Browns, who are at the bottom right now of the AFC with the Patriots. You've got another matchup with the Raiders. You've got a matchup with the Colts, who right now in the record book, they're ahead of Denver right now. You've got a matchup with Cincinnati, who's also below them right now, and you have to go on the road in Cincinnati late December to do that. And then obviously you have some games coming up now, obviously against Baltimore and against Kansas City. Like you have to take care of conference play because tiebreakers come to the mix here. Right now, the Los Angeles Chargers, if they would have won on a Monday Night Football this past week against Arizona, they would be ahead of Denver. They'd be in that 7th or that 6th spot there because they beat Denver, so they've got the tiebreaker advantage. So now Denver has to take care of business in these AFC games. You can't drop an NFC game, but you have to string along, I think, more wins here. And I think that Denver can do that. I think that they're a team that's not really concerned with the outside noise, but they just got to stay the course. And I think if they can do that and the offense can get going, Denver's going to be in a better position, I think, than most people thought they would be.
Yeah, and then, obviously the Broncos starting quarterback this year is Bo Nix, who they selected with the 12th overall pick in the 2024 NFL Draft. I mean, you look at what he's done so far this season, 1,246 passing yards, 8 total touchdowns, as well as 5 interceptions, 61.2 completion percentage. What's your initial reaction to how Nix has played to start the season?
I think Nix has had some rookie growing pains. I think it's been evident, but he's also had a lot of bright spots. And look, I would say in the first 2 weeks, you go on the road, your first game against Seattle, you throw, a few interceptions, not ideal, right? And then, week 2, you throw one in the red zone that should have been a touchdown, and it changes the course of it. 0 touchdowns to 4 interceptions, Denver's 0-2, and all of a sudden the narrative is, oh my goodness, hey, Bo Nix doesn't look so great. Then week 3, he comes out against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. So I think at that time, and Tampa was very good. They can put up points, but Tampa was a team that, nobody, I think, expected Denver to go on the road to beat them. They 26-7. I mean, they took care of business. The Jets game, a little bit of a monsoon. I feel like that was a little bit of an outlier considering the heavy downpour. Aaron Rodgers himself had trouble throwing it, but Bo's the only quarterback in that game who threw a touchdown, and obviously a very important drive. Second drive of the second half there, hit a nice 27-yard dagger route there to Cortland Sutton, and then obviously the back corner of the end zone found him for the touchdown. Bo has demonstrated growth in a lot of areas. His legs, I think, have been a surprising development in terms of just how often he's running. Some of it's based on escaping pressure. Some of it's on a design run like we saw on Thursday Night Football against the Saints. But I think the one thing we got to see with Bo is just continue to take steps forward. I think the one thing he's doing, he's avoiding sacks, which is a good thing. You don't want to take sacks. There are a lot of guys right now in the NFL who are taking too many sacks. But you also don't want to turn the football over. Bo almost had an interception on Thursday night, but I think for the most part, his decision making has been clean. He doesn't usually tend to make the same mistake over and over again, which is a good sign for a young guy. But I would say the one thing is, making sure his footwork's a little bit more consistent. But, I'd say that Bo is impressive. And look, people are talking about Jaden Daniels. Jaden Daniels is having a terrific start to his career in Washington, but Jaden has playmakers around him. He's got Terry McLaurin. He's got a strong run game going right now, and you have a good defense right now that's playing well in Washington. So I'd say that while Jaden is playing well, he's also got a supporting cast that's helping make things a little bit easier on him. Bo's supporting cast, they just don't have a true playmaker yet on the offensive side of the ball. Cortland is obviously a guy who can be that, but teams are trying to take him away. That's why we're seeing a lot more of the young guys here. I think it'll come together, but I'm pleased with his progress that he's made so far.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, another Broncos rookie to keep an eye out for is running back Audric Estime. Of course, Estime was a fifth rounder, extremely dominant in college for Notre Dame. However, he hasn't really been utilized that much in the Broncos offense this season. He did have his best game, I would say, this Thursday. He did have the fumble at the end, but was somewhat productive, at least until that happened. Do you expect him to earn a greater role as the season progresses?
I think that's the goal in mind. I think that you're going to see three running backs used. I think Javonte Williams right now is the primary guy. He's healthy. He's coming off of a great game. He'll be the primary guy. Jaleel McLaughlin's the change of pace back and is trying to develop into that joker role that Sean Payton wants offensively. Estime, he's going to get more opportunities. I'd say the only thing getting in his way right now is the fumbling. That's the number one thing. But it's like anytime he touches the ball, he hits the hole. He's got good vision. He's running through people. So the yards after contact is promising, and he's getting positive chunk yardage. Just the issue is, hey, protect the nose of that football. I used to coach running backs, and we always told our players, high and tight, tuck the nose, secure it tight to your chest. And, the issue is when you come outside with the ball and people can punch it out, it's a problem. But when you're getting wrapped up, now you got to cover it with two. That's something that Sean Payton is going to heavily emphasize. And Sean doesn't like turnovers. So Estime is going to have to prove that he can hold on to the football. I think if he's going to want to see any more carries or a larger volume of carries, there has to be a level of trust there. And I think that's going to be something we'll continue to monitor. But it's hard to deny that, hey, when he does hold on to the football, he does look promising, and he is a little bit of a spark plug to the offense.
Yeah, now, the last rookie that I really want to focus on is wide receiver Troy Franklin, who was selected in the fourth round. Obviously, he also played with Bo Nix, had that connection in the university or at the University of Oregon. In Franklin's last two games, he's combined for 7 receptions, 81 receiving yards, and a touchdown. Would you say he's earned that wide receiver 2 role, especially now with Josh Reynolds being placed on IR?
Yeah, I mean, I'd say there's still probably a little bit more work to be put in there by Troy, but from where he was at in training camp, the preseason, and even to start the regular season, I mean, he was a game day inactive for the first several weeks. And because of injuries, now you start to see a little bit of an accelerated role there. When Devon Vele went down with the rib injury after week 1, we got to see a little bit more Troy Franklin. He had that drop against the Raiders that everyone's looking back on and saying, man, if he would have hauled that in, okay, hey, the conversation around Bo Nix would have been different. It was a great throw by Bo. Just Troy's got to haul that in. The drops have been a little bit of a problem for him in training camp, but outside of really that one moment in the regular season, it hasn't been an issue for him. I would say for Troy, he's getting more and more comfortable with the offense, and certainly the way that they're moving around and using him. Obviously, they love his speed across the middle of the field. They're combining him with Marvin Mims in certain packages, and so it's putting defenses in a little bit of a bind. And hey, both these guys are fast. Who do we have to worry the most about? Troy's making the most of his opportunities. I think his chemistry with Bo is obviously something that you want to continue to build on. I think that Sean Payton has invested in that. Been very pleased with his progression that we've seen through the last handful of weeks, and hope to continue to see it happen for him.
Yeah. And then speaking of wide receivers, Cortland Sutton had 0 targets on Thursday. Is that something to be worried about, or was it just an off night for him?
Yeah, I'm not necessarily too worried about it. I think for me, I would have been more worried about it if his effort in the blocking department was subpar. Like Cortland's always a guy, like Cortland wants the ball. But Cortland is also not a guy who's going to visibly pout that he's not getting the football. I mean, he's a super competitive guy. I think Cortland's probably one of the more misunderstood Broncos players. I think he's got some fans have a negative perception of him, but the reality is, I think if you watch the tape and you look at what Cortland does, even though he didn't get a target in that game, he was blocking his tail off. I mean, you talk about the quarterback design keeper there by Bo Nix to the left side there where they're pulling the guard and the tackle. Cortland Sutton and Lil Jordan Humphrey to the left side. They're both crack blocking, and they do a great job. Cortland's blocking on the perimeter was really strong all throughout the evening on Thursday night. So even though he wasn't getting the ball, Denver's offense was able to spread some things around, and he was obviously very supportive of his teammates there. I think it was just one of those games. Hey, you got Marshawn Lattimore who's covering you, obviously a very good corner in the league. You got a safety over the top in Tyrann Mathieu. And then really it was daring the Broncos say, hey, we want you to beat us with guys like Lucas Kroll, Devon Vele, Troy Franklin. And luckily Denver's run game was going because then it might have played into the favor of New Orleans a little bit. But he's just handled that. He's a captain, and obviously he's got the ultimate respect of his teammates. I just think it was a one-game thing. I don't think it's a concerning trend necessarily. I think we'll see a little bit more one-on-one opportunity, especially if Vele and Franklin continue to make plays and Kroll in the tight end position. If he continues to make some plays, teams are going to be forced to respect that, and that'll open up some more one-on-ones for Cortland down the stretch.
Yeah, and then of course the Broncos' next matchup will be, as you mentioned, at home against the 1-6 Carolina Panthers. Just came off that really big loss against the Commanders, 40-7. So a very winnable game for Denver. What would you say are the keys to victory in that contest?
Yeah, I think a lot of it, okay, Andy Dalton's going to be the quarterback. The Carolina Panthers already went on the road this year once after everyone kind of wrote them off a little bit. They lit up the Las Vegas Raiders in Vegas. Even though that they're down record-wise, and look, they're banged up at the linebacker position right now, they're trying to find a way to just get some sort of momentum. And obviously, former Bronco Josie Jewell, I'm not sure if he'll play in this game. He's got a hamstring injury. But former defensive coordinator Giro Evero, who Denver, first had – in mind, maybe consideration for the head coaching job. When Sean Payton got it, Sean wanted to keep Evero on the staff, and he didn't want to do it. So I just think that there's a couple of ties here that bind a little bit. Number one thing you can't do, especially coming off of a win, is you can't overlook a team that's down, because when you do that, there's some danger associated with that. And I think that the Broncos have a good enough mentality that they're going to come out here, they're going to try to run the football, be efficient in the passing game, but more importantly, they're going to try to pressure Andy Dalton and stop the run game. I mean, the Panthers do have some backs who have the capability of breaking off big, explosive plays, so you have to contain the run game, as Denver has done a really good job of for the most part this season. Continue to pressure the quarterback, and I think that'll play into the favor of Denver, but it's just being more efficient on the offensive side of the ball for the Broncos. I think that'll be the biggest difference maker in this game on Sunday.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, I do have one final question to ask before we wrap things up. If there was one piece of advice you could give to an aspiring sports broadcaster and or journalist like me, what would it be?
I would always say the number one thing is there are going to be media companies, a lot of media companies out there. They want clicks, and they want a lot of their on-air talent to say things that's going to cause a little bit of controversy. I've never subscribed to that. Like, that's never been my train of thought. Like, when I analyze players, I know a lot of players tune in. Like, players, you'd be surprised. Players tune in, players' families tune in, their wives, their siblings, they all pay attention to what's being said about either them or the player that obviously they know. And that stuff always gets back to them. And I always think that the number one thing to do is never make your analysis of a player or a team personal, right? Never in a way that comes across as maybe like a personal jab or like you have a personal vendetta, anything like that. There's a lot of that in today's sports media world. The game is changing a little bit. Everything's a little bit more digitally evolved, which is great. I think especially for young aspiring broadcasters and people who want to get into journalism like yourself, always do things with honor, right? Always do things where, hey, if you go up to a player and you want to know, like if you ask a question, but it's something you can't say. Like, for example, if you say, hey, off the record, what happened here? Or off the record, I want to chat about this. If they're willing to do that, keep it off the record. There are a lot of people that go against that say, hey, it's off the record, but then it goes and gets reported and that causes trouble. I mean, players as is have a hard time trusting the media because, hey, the media it's a content mill. It's what can I say that's going to cause the most controversy, get the most clicks, and even if it's not true. Always operate, I think, with those principles, and I guarantee you players and teams will respect you. And it's not about trying to toe the company line or say, hey, I do this just so I can make the team happy. The team has a job to do, and they know that you also have a job to do as well as a journalist or as a reporter or as a broadcaster. And if you're fair, they'll be fair with you. And I think that's probably the number one thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, with that being said, I can't thank you enough for coming on. I really do appreciate it. Is there anything else you want to say to the people watching before we wrap things up?
No, I say keep doing what you're doing. There's going to be people who are going to try to discourage you from doing whatever it is you're doing. They're going to tell you, "Hey, I don't like your stuff. You're not good." Like you're going to get comments like that. It's hard. We're humans. We're humans, and it's hard not to take criticisms personally at times. But at the end of the day, the people that have the most to say about you, they don't know how you prepare. They don't know your thought process, and they don't know you. They just know that there's something about whatever you're doing that, they project their own issues onto you. So I would say don't be discouraged, because there's going to be times where, hey, it's a frustrating industry. It's hard sometimes. It makes you question whether or not you want to stick with it or do it. But if you really want to do it, stick with it. Don't get discouraged in yourself. Understand, hey, there's going to be times where you find your breakthrough. I think when you realize that, you'll understand what it is that you're meant to be doing. And I think that's the number one thing. Stay true to yourself. Don't let people discourage you from chasing something you're passionate about.
Yeah, again, big thanks to Cody Roark for being the 16th ever Highlight Haven interview guest. And as always, we'll see you next time.